Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and apologize to everyone. I, for some reason, had difficulty logging on, probably my thick fingers, but unfortunately, it delayed us. So I'd like to call the meeting of the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee on October the 19th at 10 a.m. to order. With that, I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. And we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And if I could ask the clerk to conduct roll call, please.
Sure. Chair Emo.
Present.
Councillor Legree.
Present.
Councillor McWhirter.
Present.
Chair Emo, we have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, thank you. We'll move to the presentation of the Finance Delivery Review final report. Is that
I'm just waiting for Tammy to log on, so maybe we can move ahead to.
We'll move ahead then. So with that, we'll move to C2, which is the town renovations monthly update by our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe the clerk will share her screen. So good news, we're really getting close to the end, and Chandos, with the assistance and oversight of our architect, has really been kind of on the job dealing with change orders in a timely fashion. So we're at 80% completion. Occupancy has been achieved for the business hive. The finance team relocated there just for continuity of service. And we're hoping that the business hive partners will get in there shortly once the staff area is completed. Also, the health unit which is 1B, has also achieved occupancy, and the health unit has started moving in. And their formal start date to their lease will be November 1st, and we appreciate their patience, both our business hive partners as well as the health unit. There will be an update to that lease to confirm the change in date, but I know they're very happy with the space. The contractor is mobilizing, as I said, to achieve substantial completion within a month. They're hoping to get the bulk of the work done prior to hunting season, but the date that they've talked about is November 20th as the final. Staff are expected to move into the refreshed staff area by the end of the month. The furniture contractor and subs will be installing those desks and furniture next week. And then from there, we'll move our finance team out of the hive, move our hive partners into the hive, and then also the staff that have been working out of the rec center from the development engineering and environment team will be moving over as well. So it's a bit of a logistical, not nightmare, but challenge to make sure everybody's here and that we're not impacting service here for customers coming to town hall. We did need to order additional furniture for the health unit and the upstairs office. We tried to repurpose existing furniture, but when it was moved, it wasn't stable and wasn't in a good condition. So that had to happen. And the remaining work includes completion on the accessible washrooms, the lobby stairwell finishes. We're essentially at the lobbies getting there, but the stairwells are next. And the second story renovations will start next week. That's okay if we want to go to change orders. I did mention in previous reports about the asbestos abatement and mold remediations, but I didn't provide the amount. So there was significant abatement and remediation in the entirety of the old detachment space. So that dollar figure has been added to this. In addition, there was an allocation for communications install of $25,000. It actually came in at $19,000. And that we had to relocate a toilet drain and lavatory with the fire separation work. So a lot of the change orders were once we opened up the walls down there in the detachment space that had been empty for a number of years. And so things such as asbestos remediation, but also fire separation. So the next slide. So in terms of the construction budget, the general contractor was 964. Change orders to date are 198. We anticipate that there might be one more, but generally speaking, as we're really close to the end, we have a good sense of where we're at. And the architect and project management has been at 105. So those figures are inclusive of non-refundable HST, and have been, I got Aaron did review them to make sure that I was where we're at. For change orders, we've put in what we've been billed to date, and so reconcile that amount as well. Next slide. So just some photographs. So the lobby area, so the flooring has been done, sorry. Yep. And then, so this is the accessible washroom, the photo on the right. So that is kind of behind where kind of the kiosk was when this was a detachment. That is now a fully accessible washroom that we'll have on the main floor, and we'll have also a fully accessible washroom on the second floor. Next slide. This is a photo of the business hive, which was the entry point to the detachment area. So that area contains a boardroom, 2 offices, and 4 cubicles, and has been used over the last month or so by finance for continuity of service. So we will have our BIA, Chamber, Economic Development Team, Community Futures Development Corporation, and I believe the Enterprise Renfrew County share in the space. And then we'll be looking at businesses that wish to book the conference room for their purposes will be able to do so, as well as either the office or the cubicles. We also have 2 spaces that are underutilized at One Innovation that we're going to bring into the mix as well. So to provide some opportunities for some revenue generation, but also for businesses that are looking for a quiet office or a conference room in a professional setting. So it's a very clean, professional space, and I think will be well received by our partners who have seen it. Next slide. This is the health unit space. So on the left, this is, if you remember, where the jail cells were. Not sure if anybody made their way in there. So this is where the jail cells were. So it did a lot of work in terms of demo, but also floor leveling. So the health unit is going to be using that, what they call hoteling, where they have some staff coming in and out. Unfortunately, we had promised 4 desk spaces. When we repurposed the existing, we could only fit 3. We promised them 4. We put a lot of wood glue and screws to try to make them work. They're not going to work. So the health unit has been very generous and working with what we were able to put there, but 4 cubicle spaces, as we promised, would be in the space. On the right is the door kind of out from the back entrance from Plant Street. So when people will be entering the health unit space, on the left will be the program space, which is the upcoming one, and through the door is the staff area. It includes there's 2 half baths and the staff area and a storage area for their vaccination equipment and storage, and this kitchen area. Next, this is the accessible washroom. So this building will now have 3 fully modern accessible washroom spaces that have all the necessary requirements to meet the code. So near their program space, they'll have this accessible washroom. And this is the area that was at one time the boardroom that had been transformed into change rooms with female and male change rooms. It's now their program space where they're going to utilize it for training, but then they're also going to utilize it for clinics and some of their program space. And that's right out the door. So the health unit has both program space and then office administrative areas within their lease. And I should just point out that they're paying $20 a square foot, so NX 18 and change for the space, plus any leasehold improvements that we provided them. So they're paying market rate, and we're glad to have them as a partner. Next slide. I think that's it. If there's any questions, if we want to unshare, I'd gladly take any questions. And the next update will be a really close to completion one. So good news is we've been able to complete this project, and we thank Chandos for their professionalism, and Ray Zabak, our architect, who has been very great to work with and kept change orders cost efficient and timely in terms of getting this work done.
Thank you. And I just before we take questions, I just wanted to reassure when I just screwed on the screen, it was only to plug or turn my power bar on. I plugged in both my computers and suddenly noticed that they were telling me that I wasn't getting power. So with that, very quickly, if I understand correctly, the health unit piece, that door out on the Plant Street, is that a new door? Or is that the old door that used to come in beside the garage area? And then also we did put two new windows in there as well. So, just if people are looking at the face of the building.
Yeah, so it was the old door that was like had a punch pad that the OPP would use for transportation. We kept the garage, and there is a storage area that is not part of the unit space. They did the new door into their kind of main door, and they have a sign on the door. It has fenestration, so there's light going into the space. And then where the cells used to be, three windows were added, and then a secondary egress door was also done. So there is some just cleanup in terms of the grass cutting, and the windows need weather stripping. And I should point out that our staff crew, and I want to thank them, did the sidewalk to meet accessibility. So they were able to do the sidewalk accessing, and they have a separate Plant Street address as well. So the health unit space is a completely separate space with proper fire separation from the rest of the building, whereas the business hive is accessed through our lobby.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Legree or Councillor McWhirter, any questions?
No, I'm all good.
Okay, thank you.
No, I have none.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so with that, then we'll move back to C1, and if the CAO could introduce our guest, please. You're muted.
Sorry, I have 3 screens connected here, and I was like, how do I get my mouse to this screen? And I guess it's to the right. I was up here and I couldn't get down here. So as we know, one of the first projects we had WCSC consultants do was the financial services review. And we've seen a lot of change in this team, and we're very thankful for the leadership of Aaron Broom. And we were able to, Jen Fleming has moved up through the ranks, and we were able to recruit Mitchell Ferguson, and Cheryl, of course, is part of that team. But it is a team that has seen a lot of change. And what we were looking for is some process improvements where we can make it as easy as possible for the day-to-day work. Finance does a lot of work quietly behind the scenes. And so what we were trying to do here is provide some insights to Aaron as the treasurer and the director of this team on as we move forward and as we look at technology to improve processes. I should point out that Tammy did similar work in Whitewater region, where what flowed from that is for every process, accounts payable, accounts receivable, we were able to look at process improvements and improve our processes over time. So the goal here is to receive this next at council as a guiding document with instruction to the treasurer to implement this and look at a work plan and bring any cost implications going forward. One good example is we've budgeted $150 to look at our financial software so that it meets our needs as a starting point. But I'll pass it over to Tammy, and I believe Carolyn will share the screen, Tammy, and then just move slides. I believe that's the plan. So over to Tammy, and as you know, the firm is also assisting us with a winter summer maintenance review, which will be presented at this afternoon's committee, and also doing the work on the third party as a third party review of the Mattaway project for lessons learned for major projects going forward. So I'll pass it over to Ms. Carruthers.
Thanks so much. Can everybody hear me okay? I apologize. I tried to log in. I was listening to you, but I couldn't actually get the passcode to work. So being a technology company, not be able to get into Zoom is an interesting thing. So thank you. And yes, thanks, Robert. I will say that this is the certainly the committee version. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, as he mentioned, in terms of process mapping and stuff that we will send to Erin and her team. So yeah, if I can share, or if Carolyn's going to share, either way.
Tammy, honestly, whatever's easier. If you,
Okay.
I can give you sharing capabilities because that way I can work the back end. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
get John
okay.
logged on as well.
Okay.
So-
My colleague, John Scorbahash, is also here. So,
yes, so I'm going to make you co-host.
okay, great. Thank you. It's probably easier.
You should have capabilities now.
Okay.
And sorry, John, I had you in the background. I just couldn't get to you.
Okay. So, hopefully you can see my screen. Everybody can see my screen, okay? Excellent.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Yes, so I do have John Scorbahash on the line as well. John, can you just say hello so I can hear you?
Hi, folks.
There he is.
Nice,
Okay,
nice to
great.
see everyone.
Okay, so we'll talk about the project itself. As Robert mentioned, this has been a little longer than we would normally do, but because we were doing the other reviews as mentioned, some of that being a corporate service, finance, of course, has a lot of partnerships with the departments that we were working with on the other reviews. So it did inform this as well, this actual review. So that's part of the reason we did stretch it out a little bit so that we could look at the impacts on the finance department and vice versa with the departments. So we'll talk about the approach, our findings, and of course recommendations. And as I mentioned, there's a much more detailed report due to the departments with process maps and operational pieces. So in terms of the objectives as we knew it, was to look at the town's financial management practices, look at the financial software that's currently being utilized and some opportunities for greater efficiencies, as well as processes. So one of the things that we're always cognizant of and I guess recommend to municipalities is software is a tool, it is not the solution. You can have the best software in the world, which we see in lots of organizations, and very bad process, so software is not going to solve that. So we looked at a lot of the processes, and of course I'm going to say this out loud, is that they were inherited processes. So the current treasurer inherited many processes that have been in place for a long period of time. So this is a great opportunity to move forward and look at best practices. So we have done these types of reviews. We're probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 finance departments. We look at best practices, not just internally in terms of the municipal sector, but also in the private sector, because of course, finance does not just stay in the municipal sector. Although I will argue, and I think most of my treasury colleagues would agree, is that the complexities in the municipal sector finance is unique to the sector, because in the private sector, you typically only have 1 or 2 lines of businesses. In the municipal sector, you have 8, 9, 10 lines of businesses that are completely different from each other and also have different funding sources. So, and of course, private sector cannot tax. So it does make it unique. We also were asked to look at the culture, the structures in the organization, and come up with a roadmap for improvement. So what did we do? We went through obviously a planning phase, reviewing documentation and service exploration through process mapping. And of course, consultations, not just within finance, but also in other departments. That allowed us to create the current state with the opportunities for the future in terms of future states. So how could we potentially eliminate non-value added activities in finance, still maintain proper controls, but find the capacity within the organization to be able to deliver more value added services. So finance, in terms of the profile, at the time when we started this review, actually, this should be under the treasurer, you had the deputy treasurer, the accounts receivable coordinator, purchasing coordinator, and the compensation specialist, but this should be actually under the treasurer's role. So in terms of financial management, there's really 4 areas. You know, the typical finance reporting and transactional piece is supposed to be only really one part of that. So financial accounting and reporting is obviously important. It is mandated under the Municipal Act to follow the Public Sector Accounting Board requirements and produce financial statements for the public. That's the public-facing piece. Under the Act, all municipalities also must file a financial information return. It's supposed to be by May 31st of each year. And by September 30th, if it has not been filed, they could actually withhold, the province could withhold funding, which I have seen in the past. This is an area I think that the town has primarily had the auditors do, and we would argue that that should come in-house. And there's been, because of some turnover, there's been a bit of a lag in getting the financial statements and the FIR finished. So again, a lot of that comes from what we'll talk about in terms of systems and processes. But and then the municipal sector must have their financial statements audited by a public accountant that is appointed. And those auditors are appointed at the most at 5 years by council. And so the auditors actually report to council. And I would say that it is good practice sometimes to look and go through an RFP process and look at changes in auditors on occasion. The reason being is that it's a fresh look, just like we are doing that. So looking at the controls in place. Now it's very important for folks to know that the audit is intended to provide an opinion on whether the financial statements fairly represent the operations of the organization in all material respects. And the reason I bring that up is that it does not prevent improprieties. So materiality level is different by in each organization, and it's based on an assessment by the auditors as to how effective the internal controls are, and through a series of questionnaires. So it means that if if you have an error up to your materiality level, you'll still get a clean audit opinion. So that does not mean that there are not errors in the financial statements. It just means that they're not material. So I can give you a really good example is the City of Ottawa's materiality is $20 million. So they could have misstatements up to $20 million and still get a clean audit opinion. Not usually, it doesn't mean one material misstatement, multitude, but it's important for council to know that. So that's the financial accounting piece, and in terms of that, the town does a good job. Other than, like I said, some of the processes are challenging. That is the core. Management, accounting, and reporting is really the area of internal. So it is not mandated in terms of what has to be presented, but it's focusing on revenue and expense management and reporting to departments and to committees and council. So this is really based on your own processes and your own management requirements. This includes asset lifecycle management reporting, which is now required under the OREG 58817. Includes forecasting and analysis, management and performance reporting. And so that brings in not just financial information, it also includes performance. And so best practice is that you take your strategic plan, which I believe you're working on now, and develop business plans for each department area, and then reporting on a few key performance indicators and linking the financial results. So one of the big areas for improvement are around doing earned value analysis. So when you're looking at a project or you're looking at a process, that you're saying, oh, it's not just financial results, budget versus actual, it's actually against what was planned to be achieved and what has been achieved for the financial results that have been experienced at that point. So that's a big area, as well as forecasting. Forecasting should bring in what your encumbrances are against your budget. So if you've got projects that have been committed to, and also looking at the trends and the variances. And of course, our experience over the last couple of years, lots of the variances happened within the year that were not expected. So price level changes, if you have anything that's currency related as well, those all need to be analyzed to determine what truly is the variance that is occurring. And the reason I bring that up is very often just because you have a surplus doesn't mean it's a good thing, because a surplus in a financial result could mean that you actually haven't achieved what you were intended to achieve. So you actually may have a liability in the future. So so a very important area to build on, and the town does suffer a little bit with a lack of capacity to be able to do some of that analytical piece. That's not just from a staffing perspective, but your financial system also is very challenging to be able to do that kind of work. When we look at program financing, of course, you must have property taxes and levies. That's how you survive. It is a very complex pieces of legislation in the municipal sector. There's a whole area around tax policy, and primarily the county would be developing that tax policy on your behalf, but it certainly should be a consultative process. User fees, developing user fees based on costing and policy is very important. So a lot of times municipalities will simply look at their neighbors and determine what their user fees are. It really should be cost-based and analyzed over a period of time, including I'll put in there equipment charge out rates are also considered to be a fee that should be studied based on your actual costs. When we look at something like recreation fees, they should be in line with costs. And then if council decided that they wanted to be able to keep fees below cost, that should be a conscious decision based on knowledge. So again, you really do need to have good job costing analysis to be able to do that. Grants and grant management, it sounds like they're easy. It's not. Managing grants is a job on its own. Some municipalities that have a lot of grants, it's a whole position. So it's not just about reporting on them, it's actually being able to explore and find additional grant opportunities, which is a significant investment in time. Investments, an area where municipalities are restricted to some degree. Some municipalities now are looking at joint investment boards, which is a new prudent investor legislation that was passed a few years ago now. You're definitely too small for that, but some municipalities are looking at joint boards across several municipalities. So probably in Eastern Ontario, it would probably have to be everybody who's in the Eastern Ontario caucus that would have to be involved in a joint board, but it does provide some opportunities to do different investments. So as opposed to just simply having basic investments at the town level. Development charges, of course, have been impacted. So with Bill 23. Reserves and debt. So the town does have a reserve policy. I believe Ms. Broom updated it a couple of years, probably 2022. But there's some areas there that I would say need to be updated as well in terms of the identification of the individual reserves, what the intention and purpose of the reserves are, and what the basis of the perhaps target might be. Now that you've got your updated asset management plan, it's quite important that you develop that reserve policy to align with that plan. The only thing I would say is, you know, you do need to have regular updated replacement costs to do that effectively. And then finally, debt. You currently don't have a debt policy. Highly recommend, that's one of our recommendations, is to develop that debt policy. You are going to be entering into some other long-term debt with Mattaway. So important that you get that policy in front of council. And then what I would call the last pillar of financial management, to me, is the most fun part, is around, I know that's kind of a weird thing for someone to say finance is fun, but it actually is, planning and performance. So strategic planning and that integrated business planning. So I'm certainly 100% supportive of having a strategic plan, but the most success you're going to have is if you roll that down to business plans with specific activities and outcomes, and how each department contributes to that and the resources required to do so. And then a good performance management framework rolls that down to the staff. And so that staff feel and can commit to supporting those council goals. And that really becomes part of your performance management framework, which I think the CAO is also working on in terms of developing individual performance. Long-term financial plan, it's very important that municipalities get a long-term financial plan, and that looks at your growth, it looks at your programs and services and how you're going to finance it over the long term. And clearly asset management plan feeds into that. So that is an area for focus. Your annual budget process, I understand it's been quite improved, but I will say that the back end is still painful. So what council is seeing is the result of many sweating hours in the background with a very outdated financial system. So I can't say enough about the dedication that the staff had to do that, but the way that you can sort of move forward, and I know that actually I think on today's agenda, you're talking about your next budget process. The way you can start to simplify budgets in the future is to move to multi-year budgeting. That is allowed under the Municipal Act. And typically we would suggest that it occur in the first year of the council term. And basically what that looks at is you know, most projects that you do, even though you're actually approving them on an annual basis, are usually not a one-year project. And so we almost put ourselves into pushing something into a one-year project because of the annual process. The Act does allow that multi-year budget. You still have to adopt your, pardon me, your property tax rates every year, but it does simplify things because it means that you're not going through the whole process every year. So highly recommend that. There's a lot of training on how to do multi-year budgeting. Our firm has actually done that kind of training for the municipal finance officers. And many municipalities are adopting that. And of course, you got all your master plans that feed into all of those financial plans. They shouldn't be done in isolation. They impact, obviously, your asset management impacts your budget process. No longer can you just say, oh yeah, that's a plan, let's put it on the shelf. It should actually be informing your budget process, as well as other master plans like your transportation master plan, recreation, all of those things. My experience is that those plans are great, but they very rarely have the financial impact included in them. So if you are looking at those types of master plans in terms of the RFP requirements, I highly recommend that you include that financial piece, because it's great to have those ideas, but if you don't know how much it costs, you probably will never do them. So that being said, I will say that the Municipal Act says that you must have a treasurer. It does not have to be an employee of the municipality. However, it's very rare that they're not. We are seeing some sharing of treasurers. What I would say is the Municipal Act does not do the treasurer role any justice. However, it was written a long time ago, before municipalities were required to do things like asset management plans, before really truly gone to accrual-based accounting. So it's very focused on cash, which we're not in a cash world anymore. We're in an accrual-based accounting world. And there is much movement afoot in the finance realm to try to get this changed in the next iteration of the Municipal Act. But I can use this to say that the underlying definition does lend itself to a higher level of a position. So collecting money, of course, very important. Depositing money, paying all debts, maintaining accurate records and accounts, obviously very important. But I'll highlight section E of 286. The treasurer shall provide counsel with such information with respect to the financial affairs as it requires or requests. And when it says requires, it is really incumbent on the treasurer to understand what is required for counsel to make evidence-based decisions. So this is considered a minimum standard. And if you read it, and certainly looking at it from an accountant, I would say it's actually contradictory to good internal controls, because that actually makes it sound like the treasurer is doing everything, which is not good segregation of duties. So that's a whole another discussion, but it really basically you need to do that. And of course, ensuring your investments are in line with the requirements of the Act. So really the movement of foot is to, because of the complexity of the treasurer role, the movement is to look more at a chief financial officer role, which is really more about the strategic side of things. So not just counting beans, but starting to grow them and driving results. So very important role for the treasurer today is to be a business partner with the departments, with council and the CAO to develop strategies to meet the objectives of the organization. The Municipal Finance Officers Association asked us at WSCS to create the new role or the evolving role of the treasurer to that. And there's really, it's been agreed that the role of the treasurer today is not just what's in the really defined in the act. It's really 4 roles that are important. One obviously is the operator. That's clearly making sure you've got good procurement, accounts payable, receivables, cash management, payroll, and other financial transactions. So that's really the transactional piece. And unfortunately, it takes up way too much time because the processes are so outdated and the systems are not supporting your team. The steward, of course, very important to safeguard municipal assets. That is things like reporting, budget development, internal controls, audits, financial reporting. So all of the things that are also generally mandated, but not all are mandated around internal controls and making sure that your assets are not misappropriated. So that steward role has always been there. It looks from the outside as being an audit, but in actual fact, that's only one very small element of stewardship. Having reporting to council is a very important stewardship role, as well as the departments. And then the strategist role, basically contributing to the future direction of the municipality and looking at long-term financial planning and sustainability is very important. And then finally, really today's world, finance is changing quickly. And so finance needs to drive change and be a catalyst for change. So the traditional controllership approach is gone. In other words, no, you can't. You've got to turn it into yes, you can, and this is how I'm going to help you get there. That's a very important set of capabilities today, looking at different ways to do things and managing risk and leveraging technology to help the departments. So that's both the current state and sort of where municipalities need to go. And so we assessed the town on those bases. So that's really for best practice. So we did hold a session with the staff and the CAO around the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, a SWOT session. Oops. Sorry, just lost my earbud. And which was very telling on its own. So I can say this, that the staff already know what the issues are. The now is being able to have the time and capacity to be able to change them. So you've got lots of strengths in that team. There's a huge desire to be customer service oriented. As Robert mentioned, a lot of change, and they've been able to be very resilient to that change, even though they probably felt that they were overwhelmed at times. So lots of integrity, and certainly from a ongoing transactional basis, there's, they've got that good strength. The weaknesses really are about the processes that are in place and like I said, inherited without having the time to be able to change them or understand perhaps even how they could be changed and still meet the requirements. There's a lot of duplication of effort that in terms of steps, in terms of documentation. Loss of corporate knowledge, of course, you've had change. You've got a lot of, paper-based processes and no technology to support transforming. Like even your online e-commerce is very clunky. It's not customer focused, and the uptake has been low. That's unusual. You know, days, nights that staff are in the office printing tax bills. In today's world, many municipalities don't issue any paper tax bills, or very few. So very minimal online services. The software, I'm gonna have to say that the software that you're currently using is very outdated. It's also, it's access-based, which makes it very slow. It's not on a SQL backend, very slow software. And it's underutilized even for that, but that's been because of some of this slowness. And I'm gonna, you know, this sector is suffering because there's one vendor that now owns 4 of the mid-size software for municipalities, Central Square. The support is not good. Our team actually has been brought into many places, to municipalities, to help them because the support has been so poor. So, and re-implementing software. So there's no competition, unfortunately. So that it also means, though, as anybody who's in business can probably appreciate, that if you've got 4 software doing pretty well the same thing, at some point you're not going to have developers in 4 software. So we do believe there's a risk that your product, Assist it's called, will likely not be in place much longer. It is an American company now, got bought out. There's some challenges in terms of internal controls because your software is not, I guess, feasible to really have in multiple locations. You've got software that's not integrated. So for example, your recreation program, not integrated with your financial system. And so there are, you know, pockets of cash receipting, et cetera, out there, and the integration isn't there. So you do not have a one-stop shop for your customers. There's training gaps. The town has not really, in the finance department, has not really had training. They've not been exposed outside. There's definitely training gaps. And of course, a lot of the staff that are there recently have taken on new roles, and I guess no time to do training and send folks out to training. I know that there is a commitment to start to look at external training as well. But that has been a source of frustration for staff because they're kind of thrown to the wolves. They've got to get things done. And so that's definitely a weakness. There's lots of opportunities though. So I sound like it's all bad. It's not. There's some great opportunities because your staff are really committed. Technology is an opportunity. It does take some investment, both in dollars and time, though. Like I said, buying a new financial system is not going to solve all the back-end process issues. You do need to look at the future state and make sure that you still have controls, but change those processes so that they'll have the time to do the other analytical pieces that they have absolutely no time to do now. Financial management training, not just by finance. One of the gaps as well that we've determined is that really the departments have not had financial training either. So they are responsible. They're the ones that are actually spending all the money. Finance actually spends almost no money. So the departments need that financial management training, and they need access to the system. And they need access to their budgets and their reports so that they can do their own thing. And they also need to be able to do their own forecasting. So there's lots of opportunities there. Certainly, I would suggest that you've probably operated a little bit more on an island than you need to, because there are, all of this stuff every municipality is going through. So, reaching out to your partners and getting assistance would be helpful. And moving to the CAO model has definitely already helped in the finance department with that support. And then I guess the threats, well, increasing costs. As a treasurer today, you've got to be able to have some economist training to be able to forecast what's going to happen and do some of that research and what the impact is on your services. We have, well, every one of us know we are experiencing significant inflation in areas that we have not for many, many, many years. We have interest rate hikes, which of course is impacting any debt. And of course, interest rates and inflation it just basically is being, and things like carbon tax and all that are being passed on to the customers. So small team, that's always a challenge. For two things. Number one is coverage. Number two is being able to have segregation of duty. So you do have a relatively small team, and that's normal in a town your size, but it does have it adds stress to staff, and so it's certainly changing legislative requirements, asset management, all of those things can't be done off the side of the desk. Little bit of change challenges, old technology and meters and stuff like that, they got to be replaced. We've got things like climate change or environmental changes. The Mattaway expansion I have as a threat, but it's also an opportunity, but it is an impact clearly on your financial future as well as the workload. So definitely need to deal with that. So we use what's called the COSO internal control framework to assess internal controls. This is it's an international organization, the Treadway Commission, that developed the internal control framework. And so it's based on 5 pillars, which I'll get into here. And so really your controls are not documented. So that's just an overarching finding. The financial system, as I said, is outdated. It's underutilized, actually. There's some pieces in this financial system that have never been used that could have been used. But it is, because it's access-based, the security roles are not robust. And that is a risk on its own. No, you have no project costing asset management systems. Your fixed assets are done in spreadsheets. And so those are all control risks because there's no true corporate record that is contained in a corporate system. In terms of business plans and customer service strategy, it's not in place specifically for finance, or I believe the CAO is working on a customer service strategy, which should also include customers are not just outside, I guess is what I'm going to say. You have internal customers, departments rely on finance as an example, as an internal customer. So any strategy you put in place should be looking at both internal and external customers. And really, they've never had a business plan that we can find. So in other words, something that they can latch onto and move along. And that's because it's been very reactionary approach. And, finance is very deadline oriented. We have to get our financial statements done by here this time. All of the property taxes need to be set. And so that's kind of been their plans. And don't get me wrong, I see this in many, many organizations. It's not like it's unique to the town. But it does mean that being able to have those goals and move the organization forward is really important. So I'm going to cover these in sort of these areas around governance, planning, and performance, that internal control, budgeting, and management reporting. I'm going to talk about systems and reporting. The chart of accounts is a nightmare. The chart of accounts in a financial system is like your backbone. And if you have a sore back, you have bad body, the whole body is impacted. And that's exactly how I see your financial system. It's got a bad backbone. It needs to be fixed. And that's part of the reason why financial reporting is so hard, and the financial statements, and really to be able to produce your own financial statements right now is almost impossible. Property tax and utility billings is an assist, like I said, very outdated software. Revenue management around accounts receivable, cash handling. As I mentioned, we've got external pieces, but there's some areas there, and then purchasing and accounts payable. So some of the root causes of the issues that we've seen, which, and I'll say that the main issues, of course, is we've heard about workload pressures, being able to meet deadlines. Excuse me for a second. Sorry. Meet deadlines such as your financial statements, and basically customer satisfaction, internal, external. Some of the pressures that you're seeing is there are, we put them in kind of, this is a fishbone. It's kind of like a way to, it's a cause and effect diagram. So we typically put those into 6 categories, and some of those things point to that. So on the people side, workload pressures, there's a lack of training, change management. There is no true performance management system. Your equipment, as I mentioned, pretty outdated. You have no work management, asset management systems in place. You have no budget software. So everything's done in spreadsheets. And of course, the systems that you do have are not integrated, such as booking. In terms of measures and reporting, not everyone has got the same accesses to goalposts. So basically a performance management approach. There's very few non-financial key performance indicators in place. Time of processes have generally not been captured. So when we did the process mapping, we actually did, and we'll be able to identify the capacity savings that'll be, pardon me, will result in changes in processes. But typically, time has not been captured in different processes, so you really don't know how much time it takes to do things. And of course, lack of financial reporting and forecasting is evident. And that, again, can be pinpointed to both your financial system as well as the chart of accounts. In terms of the environment and governance, really there is a lot of silos. Everybody's doing their own thing out in those departments. And that's actually impacting finance. Certainly, it's been more of a controllership approach in the past. In other words, as opposed to having a business partner kind of role. And then in terms of your processes, very many duplicated paper-based processes. So, for example, invoices are recopied in multiple places and put in various binders. And the question is, that's just history. It's the way we've always done it. We heard it many times. We've always done it that way. And so that's added to that. There's no standard operating procedures. There are some sort of how-tos, but very limited standard operating procedures for staff to follow. And in terms of the policies and materials, as I mentioned, there's a limited number of documented policies or procedures. Forms sometimes are used that, in my opinion, don't need to occur. Multiple copies and spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are great, but they are subject to manipulation and errors. And so the more you can get, well, we call them black books, actually. You want to have as much as you can in your financial systems or your corporate systems as opposed to outside. every time we see a spreadsheet, I always ask the question, why are you doing that? And they say, because we can't get the information any other way. And it's needed. So in terms of the business plan, our recommendations focus on moving to a customer-centric approach from finance. Really looking at what is needed by the stakeholders. So that includes, of course, councils, committees, departments, as well as customers outside. And so that's that strategy that's needed. Around governance and planning, there is a need for a long-term integrated financial plan that also incorporates performance metrics. Reporting, a renewed approach to reporting. Again, you need some products and technology to help, but also around policies. So one of the best internal controls you can put in place is that managers receive their reports on a monthly basis, and they need to analyze the variances and sign off that they are correct. And so, and having month-end processes to close off. That way, year-end is actually only a month, not a whole year. So some of those processes are important. Organizations, so enhanced role definitions and accountability. And then, of course, on the technology, IT strategy to re-implement Assist if you're going to keep it, or look at a replacement. And then, of course, in terms of having a financial policy framework and policies, and then new processes. So in terms of the governance, planning, and performance area, our findings are that the accountability framework is really not developed other than on the procurement side, which of course is relatively new. I believe you put in a new procurement policy last year, but accountability frameworks are not just about that. It's also about the ability to sign off on contracts and what is delegated. So and similarly in the financial realm, as around having accountabilities outlined in what we call a responsibility matrix. We talked about the business plans. The budget process the back end is complex. It continues to be, it's frustrating, it's manual, it takes a long time and a lot of resources. And it's not multi-year at this point. And does not involve some key performance indicators at this point. Asset management plan is has certainly been updated, but it's not integrated in your budget process at this point. And as I mentioned, some of the policies and procedures are outdated, and you don't have a debt policy. So in terms of the recommendations, as part of your strategic planning process, really is about having an integrated planning and performance framework. So once you're done your strategic plan, as I mentioned, best practices now, each department develops their business plans, and that gets, of course, that should come from a culmination with the staff. Staff should be involved in that, and how are you going to achieve the goals of that council and the community wants through business plans, and roll that down into a performance management framework at the ground level. So how each person is held accountable for that performance. Developing a financial policy framework with a refresh. So these policies I'm talking about, you've got your high level ones which council needs to approve, and then there will also be internal some financial management policies that are more at the department and level as well. But there's some, and I'll provide the areas that need to be addressed. The next piece is consider, regardless of what you decide to do with your financial system, There is no, I'm going to tell you, there's no software out there that does everything the municipalities need to do. You know, if I had $1 billion, you know, I would probably build one, but there isn't. So it's very unfortunate. I think there's a huge market there, but it's just not there yet. Regardless of what you do need to have a better way to do your budget process. So suggest that as a first step is to procure some budget software. So the budgeting software that's out there today will read your data from your financial system, and it'll allow you to provide dashboards for the public, for council, for departments, and be able to develop these the budget books. There's some really cool stuff that people are doing now where people can go in and they can say, oh, where is this at? Click it on a dashboard. And these are in place in many municipalities. The only thing I will say is you got to fix your general ledger first. Don't go out and buy a budget software with the state of your current general ledger. So we get called in all the time from budget software companies to say, Tammy, this is great, you know, we're going to have this client, but there's no way that our product's going to be very good unless we get a new chart of accounts. So, and then as part of the next budget iteration, start looking at how you could implement multi-year. And yes, usually you do have a 10-year capital plan, but is it truly the budget? That's the question, and it should be linked to your asset management plan and developing a budget set of guidelines. One of the things we find is the departments are kind of building their budgets based on assumptions that they have and not being corporately. And so I saw today you're looking at some of those things, so that's good. But to have that integrated approach that includes the plans. And the last thing is, I would suggest that the town should develop an annual report as part of the reporting out. Yes, you have your financial statements that are produced by the auditors, but I'm talking about the non-financials as well to support that. So best practice says you present the financial statements as part of an annual report and messages from council as well as the departments as to what's been achieved with the taxpayers' money. So that is really a best practice. So when we look at the internal control framework, what we want to look at is the control environment that's in place. So that's basically your foundation, to the risk assessment, your control activities, what information and communication is provided, and the monitoring. The risk management framework, which was released later, also looks at how effective is your risk management framework within the town. That is having a forward-looking assessment of risks. Interesting, we looked back at all of our clients that we had done service delivery reviews for in 2019. I looked at every single one of the SWOT analysis, as not one person said we have a threat of a pandemic. So now that something has happened, ice storm 1998, you know, once it happens once, it's going to happen. Flooding, you know, the areas had flooding. So what is the impact going to have on your long-term sustainability? So basically there's 4 levels of in COSO. Level 1, which is basically means you're informal or ad hoc. Level 2 is that you're at a standard level. 3 is you're at a managed level. So in other words, you've got key performance indicators, you got well understood chains of accountability. And 4, of course, would be high performing, optimized organization. Our assessment of the town is that you're between informal, and standard. So about 1.5. I know this is hard to read, and I apologize, Reeve. It is trying to capture a lot of things, but so ideally what you want to try to do is do some, as part of the business plan, is to start to move along. Should the town be at the optimized level? Well, obviously you always want to be best in class, but likely you're not going to get there. You have to spend too much investment to get there. It does mean, though, the weaker your controls are, the more you have to put resources in to mitigate the outcomes. It also impacts the level of audit sampling. So the weaker your controls are, the more sampling an auditor will have to do to satisfy themselves that your results are, in their opinion, meet the faithfulness test. So it's important that you do put some focus on controls, because you can actually reduce your audit fees, and that happens by improved controls. So, and I can give you a personal experience that in the municipality I was in, by putting in proper controls in systems, we were able to reduce our audit fees in half in a few years. So you won't be able to do that with your current system for sure, because it just doesn't have securities. And so a lot of your processes are manual controls, taking, I will call it the heroics of people to catch things before they become a defect or an issue. So the control environment really talks about things like standards, processes, and structures around internal controls. Certainly you have a new leadership structure that has made some changes, and that already resulted in new policies and a policy framework that wasn't there before. So you are on the right path. But there's a lot of areas where policies are lacking, as I've already mentioned. You know, as I said, segregation of duties is hard in a small municipality. There's no question. So you have to do what we call compensating controls to do that. Control activities, again, are pretty well, like I said, are not documented and they're not embedded. There's not really, from a risk management perspective, there's not really a risk framework yet. Reporting from the information and communication perspective, the reporting is fairly basic. There's limited analytical power in place to be able to do forecasting, and that's both time and system. And then, of course, monitoring is pretty well at the transactional basis. So that's my basis of the 1.5. I guess what I would say is the environment is there. So that's where you're actually going to be able to move forward. So, so when we look at the control environment, it also looks at things like values, ethics, codes of conduct, which I understand has been updated. You've always had a code of conduct, both for council and employees. I'm not sure how much it was reported on, but we do recommend that it bring part of your performance management framework and bring forward it on an annual basis and have people reminded of their responsibilities to around the code of conduct, report any outside businesses, those kinds of things. People do forget. Not everybody's picking up their code of conduct policy every day and checking to see if they've fallen into that. Most of it's common sense, but in terms of fraud prevention, I would actually say this should be a countywide initiative to develop a fraud prevention policy and whistleblowing protection, so that if people feel it's very hard in a small town, if they see something to be able to, where do they go if they see something that is a little strange? And so they should have whistleblowing protection. If you went countywide, that might be a better approach so that it's, if there is an investigation of any kind that's needed. So we do think you should have that kind of policy in place. In terms of the accountability perspective, developing a comprehensive, what we call a responsibility matrix with the accountabilities. So it's not just purchasing. A lot of people think, oh, I've got a purchasing policy, so I'm good. It's actually about the types of things that you can do, entering into contracts and as well. So types of as well as dollars, because we do know that people will also try to circumvent procurement policies and their limits. And so it's important that it be not just a financial piece, as well as putting in a financial control policy, which we can certainly share some that are out there that are good. Risk assessment, as I said, is not formalized. So when you're doing, especially during your financial planning and your strategic plan, part of your strategic plan really should be a risk assessment, because when you do your strategic plan, there are things that are going to derail what you plan to do because they just happen. Pandemic, we didn't even know. So all of a sudden, we're in a quandary because a lot of the things we planned to do during that period of time did not happen, just because it totally derailed everything. I certainly lived through the ice storm of '98. Basically, everything that we planned to do that year was gone because we were just cleaning up mess, and you've had similar things happen. Really, a risk management should be done in each process, and that comes from doing a internal control framework. So I would say that fraud risks are not well understood within the town. I would suggest that some training be developed. And when I say that, it's not just financial fraud, cyber security risks, and social engineering that is causing some of that is very important. I mean, even the treasurer of the city of Ottawa got hooped. So, you know, we got a big city that had a fishing expedition that caused them to send money to places they shouldn't have. So, and totally looked great. And let me say, as a fraud investigator, fraudsters are very, very clever. So it's important for staff to have some of that training, as well as council, to be honest. Again, control activities are not documented. So system administration right now in finance, it sits in finance. That's unusual. I know you don't have an IT department per se. You've got an IT support. They're not an application support. They're not system administrators, obviously. This is an issue because you basically, not that I'm saying anything that we found, but having system administration and finance where people have access to many areas is not a good control. And we see it again, unfortunately, in small municipalities, hence why, for example, in the county I was in, all the local municipalities were housed at the county level, so we could have segregation around system administration. And there's a limited amount of training and controls over procurement, implementation, testing. So there's a need, there's a framework, and this should be put in place before you move forward on some new technologies around decisions around IT governance. I would suggest in an organization of your size that it probably rests with this particular committee, the finance committee. You know, there's got to be a framework in place to make decisions and how to develop those security and compensating controls in place. So, and develop, in terms of communication, develop a program departments do not have easy access to financial data. Some of them do actually go into the financial system to look things up, but they haven't had any formalized training. And of course, it's so clunky to get reports out that it's really not that user friendly. So there is, and the challenge is when you don't have a robust system that's got good security, you'd be reticent to say, oh, I'll give access, because you don't want just anybody in there. And regular reporting, in both the council and departments needs to be developed better. And that includes training with departments on why. I mean, we heard during our reviews, people say, well, why can't I do this, that, or the other thing? Well, that's because they don't understand that, you do need to have those internal controls in place. But with robust systems, you can actually put those together. So training both for internally to the finance folks as well as the departments. And then monitoring is about monitoring controls. Your budget monitoring is relatively effective, although painful because of the system. Like I said, there's no security profile set up in the system, so it's very hard to do that. So we're suggesting your monitoring plan have a sign off by management on the financial statements, and allow finance then to actually spend the time helping in terms of the analytical side of things. So that's COSO in a nutshell with respect to the town. Let me tell you though, it probably sounds bad, but it's not different than what we see in small organizations. So I do want to say that it's very difficult to put internal controls in smaller organizations. So not unusual. In terms of reporting, as I mentioned, it's pretty limited, able to do forecasting. There's no data dictionary for the chart of accounts, which basically means that people might not necessarily know what should be coded where, other than they might look at the last invoice and say, oh, that's where it was coded, so that's where it should go, which is not necessarily the case. How does that affect reporting? Well, it's huge because, and I don't, we didn't see evidence of this, but I have seen it in many places where people just say, well, I'll put it there because I know my budget's there. But that's not going to give you good information moving forward. So it's much better to have a variance and not analyze it than just do what you've always done. The financial statements are currently created by your auditors, but you do have very good audit prep. But ultimately, the financial statements are the responsibility of management. And so management should be creating those financial statements and having the auditors audit them. And the FIR really resides internally. It's an important document that staff should understand, because if you do decide to attend or watch my presentation this afternoon, the financial information return is very important for analytical purposes. And I do find that auditors, they are focused on the financial statements. They don't necessarily understand your business. And so we have seen, even in your financial information return, some of the areas that should have been segregated to different parts of the FIR were not, because they are not either not tracked or they didn't really understand where they should go. So would like to see those moved in. Mentioned the GL is very problematic. A lot of manual processes, journal entry binders, that kind of stuff is taking up a lot of time. If you had a better system, you could actually have journal entries created in departments and approved by finance, as opposed to all of it being done in finance. There's a product within your product assist that you do have project costing, project accounting, but it's not used. So what's happened is the general ledger was created and it's got all these projects and equipment pieces and all that stuff in it for no for no reason. It's actually muddied the waters to some degree. Similarly, the fixed asset module wasn't utilized. And of course, but it is not an asset management system. It's not a work management system. So those things are needed for you to make decisions, and they're needed from a regulatory requirement perspective for your asset management plan. So, so in terms of reporting, we recommend that that audit framework be put in place to move the financial statement preparation in-house, as well as an annual report, as I mentioned, with the recommendation of a budget software. Clearly, it is the departments that need to be doing their own budgets and have that. But you definitely need to have some training. We've seen some municipalities, they put budget software in, but they don't give anybody any training. So it's actually not helpful. And then implement a monthly reporting with forecasting and non-financial information as well, with variance analysis on an earned value basis, and require that sign off. And then finally, revamp the GL. I shouldn't say it's finally, actually, this should be first. It should be done soon. And you definitely don't want any new software until you fix it. So in terms of the organization, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think there's been some changes already. This started at the beginning, but basically the gaps that we saw are in the analytical capacity piece, tangible capital assets / asset management, and procurement are the areas. I won't get into everything here. And of course, training issues. So number one, the treasurer is doing a lot of the back end part of the analysis. So, really at a treasurer role should be more speaking or concentrating on that strategic piece, taking the analytics, taking the information and transforming that into long-term. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the time or the support to do that at the moment. So that, and to move to multi-year budgeting, they definitely need some help. The treasurer needs assistance. So we are suggesting that, and this is where the biggest gap is around planning and analytics. So the other thing is that with your current positions, they are even focused too much on transactions. There are some roles that they could play to assist the treasurer and the analyst. So for example, doing the analytics around cash flow doesn't need to be an analyst. So, if you're doing accounts payable, you could be doing cash flow analysis. There's no reason why they couldn't be doing some of that. And then purchasing is a huge area that has kind of rested on every department. There's no lead to make sure that also that it's segregated and that the policy is being basically followed, other than I think the CAO and the treasurer have kind of taken that role on. But there's so much more that needs to be done in that background. I mean, you have international trade agreements that you've got to be able to follow. And so the other thing is that we also discovered that your inventory is all manual. There's no policy on inventory, and nobody knows whether it's first in, first out, perpetual inventories. It's all on spreadsheets. It's a disaster. So inventory needs to be codified and in a system. Your assets, as I mentioned, your fixed assets are all in spreadsheets. You need life cycle costing. It makes sense to have a purchasing lead be able to work with the departments and make sure that those assets get on the books, not after the end of the year, which is basically what's happening right now. And only one department uses purchase orders, but there's no reason to be even using those purchase orders because they don't go anywhere. They're just paper, and it's a bureaucratic approach to purchase orders. Don't get me wrong, purchase orders are very important. They're the contract with your vendor, but they're actually not being sent out to the vendors. And everyone else other than Public Works is not using them. So there's no encumbrance on your budget. That's what a purchase order is supposed to do. It's a contract. So implement purchase orders appropriately. By the way, Assist does have an inventory module, not great. It does have a purchase order module, not great, but it is there. It's just never been used. So if you decide that you're not going to replace the system, at least implement what you already do have, including document management. So so the purchasing side is definitely, I don't look at it just as purchasing. I look at it as also you're making sure your tangible capital assets are getting on your books, which is unfortunately very painful right now. And then develop a financial strategy for the entire town. That's not just finance, it's also the departments. You might need some external help on that, or some partnerships with some of the associations. And with the new roles, really a training needs analysis needs to be done. So in other words, this is what's expected, this is where they're currently at, and this is the gap. It's great to have new roles, but to be honest, you could throw anybody into a position, but if they don't know, if they don't have the skill set to move forward, that's not setting you up for success. And then last but not least, a performance management framework, which basically goes along with that training framework and a business plan. So in other words, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go, this is your contribution to this, and we're going to measure you on that success. And that's going to, that should really be across the whole town, but it obviously, I'm talking finance here. So we've gone through the finance, the current state. The future state basically looks, based on that, is having a purchasing coordinator. You could actually have the assistant who's basically doing accounts payable report to that person as well, but under the deputy treasurer role. So the treasurer role basically is your guiding light. And typically the deputy treasurer role is responsible for financial operations. And you've got like a planning, whatever you want to call them, a financial planning analyst. That's the person that would be focused on developing the multi-year budgets and the performance plans, and et cetera. And then you've got on your HR payroll side. I know you're looking at a HR assistance or something with the CAO, but this is really more about the transactional pieces. You don't have an HRIS, human resource information system of any kind. Everything's done outside the system. There's not that we did an HR review, but that is a huge gap for you as well. So, and then the revenue coordinator should be responsible for water billing, tax billing, etc., which is a bit of I think, a gap right now. I'm not going to go through this too much. Basically, it's sort of outlining the different roles. Clearly, the director of finance, treasurer is all about the leading the organization and ensuring that policies and the internal control framework are in place and integrating across the board. Basically, the business partner with the CAO and the departments. The manager of financial services / deputy treasurer is really making sure that things are operating and doing those approvals. And I would suggest that this role, and I know the person who's there, so I know he's up for it, being the lead on the financial systems implementation and integrations. So that would be sort of the key IT contact and creating the security profiles in any system. Certainly financial statement prep and and the FIR should lie in this role. And then, of course, basically the segregation. So oversight of all the transactions. The financial planning officer analyst role is really about the performance management framework and creating the multi-year budget guidance and development. Clearly, if you end up going with our recommendation around budget software, this role would be very much the lead on that with the help of the deputy treasurer. But doing research into trends, economic trends, doing business case analysis for different decisions. And in order to create segregation, we're suggesting that this role do your bank reconciliation, because they're not actually doing any transactions. So they could do the bank reconciliation. They would also do the asset management analysis. So the asset management plan is obviously a very technical piece that lies with the departments. But once you need somebody who's going to be able to take that information and transform that into the financing strategy, and also update the plan from a financial perspective. If you have this in-house, you're going to save the external consulting fees around that. I know you have a consultant that's doing your asset management plan today. Going forward, there's no reason why you can't bring that in-house. I mean, there's no reason for that, keeping that up to date. The compensation coordinator, of course, is responsible for payroll. Currently, at least as the last time I knew, she was doing payroll, and she kind of does a little bit on the HR side, but she was also responsible for water billing, which is a very odd role to have somebody that's doing payroll and then water billing. Literally, she used to do the meter reads. So that should not be in that role. And she was never able to actually pass it on. But we definitely think your new revenue coordinator needs to take that on. That just should be right away. So that's really about accounts receivable. And the other thing is that the focus of the accounts receivable revenue coordinator, and I've actually put AR in the role, because accounts receivable is a little different than just revenue, because you have a lot of other things. You have grants management, you've got other kinds of billings that are out there. You've got your recreation. You need some oversight around that, as well as the cash management piece. So, but setting up the tax rates, the billings, getting the statements out, utility rates, issuing collection letters, all of that kind of stuff should reside in that role. And then purchasing, whatever you want to call them, coordinator, supervisor, whatever, but really oversight of purchasing for the entire organization. This is, to me, in our other reviews, this is a huge gap that there is no oversight on. There was no oversight, I'll say, on purchasing, to the point that I think even finance felt that they didn't have that role, and really they do. You're supposed to be there to protect the organization. So the one of the, as I mentioned, purchase orders and setting those up to eliminate the issues you've got with small purchases. We're recommending you put in a procurement card approach, which takes some time to do it properly. So this role would also have that oversight. New systems actually will download the transactions from your bank. You can't do that right now, to the purchasing piece. And then, of course, monitoring all of those warranties and contract oversight, and making sure your payment certificate process is incorporated, and all of your liabilities as well as obviously all the different types of procurement activity. And then finally, you certainly currently have what's called a purchasing coordinator, basically accounts payable. I would suggest that that role can be expanded. You don't have enough accounts payable for a whole position. It's just, it's not that big. If you implement a proper purchasing purchase orders and purchasing cards, then that person can make sure the three-way matching process is done. They could do the basics in fixed assets and obviously the inventory transactions, which to some degree is occurring, but because there's no policy, the inventory transactions are done on spreadsheets, and it's not sitting in inventory properly. So that role could do that. And I know I'm probably way past my time, and I apologize. There's so much here. Technology, as I said, the system is outdated. It has limited functionality, and its security is suspect. If nothing else, we're recommending you look at a replacement for Assist. There's very few municipalities still using it, and certainly fewer still using the Access version. So if at minimum, you should move to the SQL version of your Assist. That will help with speed. It's not going to help you with functionality, but it will help you with speed. But really, there are much better products out there that even within the Central Square area. But now there's some there are some competitors coming about. But here's the big gaps. You have no asset management, work management system. As you'll hear this after, if you read my report with Public Works, everything is manual. Paper, then transcribed onto spreadsheets. Your timesheets are re-entered. It's all manual, and staff are not actually filling out their own timesheets in the departments, and it is brutal. Your foremen are spending probably a day a week each on these ridiculous spreadsheets, if not more. And that includes work. You don't actually have any life cycle costing ability at all on your assets, and you don't have an asset management system. So that's a desperate need. And then of course, HR. Assist doesn't have any HR abilities whatsoever. But like I said, if you don't decide to change, there are some areas that you could use that could help. So like I said, purchase orders, inventory, and fixed assets. There are modules within Assist, and as well as some document management. The challenge is, because it's Access, you have space limitations. So you could put your documents in there, but Access is going to crash. So it won't be able to handle it when you start adding a lot of documents. So in the interim, regardless of your decision around a new ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, you should look at a budget software. So it doesn't matter if you go to a different software, budgeting software can be implemented. It will read, all of the ones that I'm aware of will read any database that's in a SQL or Oracle database. So that will solve a lot of the reporting issues and give departments access to their financials. And like I said, the GL needs to be done first. I will say that the capacity within the organization to implement a new financial system or asset management system is limited. You probably will need some external assistance and business analyst assistance. Now, you could be really super lucky and hire an analyst, a financial planning analyst that has a lot of that background. That would be a dream. Are there a lot? No. There's not a lot of people that have both the financial and the business analyst background. So But, you know, ultimately you could try to do that. If not, you should be looking probably at some kind of outsourced short-term arrangement. You don't need it for a long term, but financial systems, anybody who thinks they're going to implement them in 2 or 3 months is sadly mistaken in the municipal sector. These are usually 2 to 3 year projects to do it properly with asset work orders. We've actually been pulled into another organization that implemented it in 2018, and they've implemented 5% of their financial system. So we've been brought in to help them finish it. So, and that's because it was done off the side of their desk. It's just not possible.
If I can just note, the chair fell off the call, so Councillor
Oh.
McWhorter, based on the procedural bylaw, you're acting chair until he comes back on. And Tammy, I don't know, we have another 10 minutes before we hit noon. I don't know if that's possible in terms of
Yep,
without
I'm
cutting
almost
short,
finished.
without cutting short the important information we're getting, but just
Yeah.
in terms of the other business, and hopefully Peter gets on, but Councillor McWhorter, just to put you on standby.
Okay. I should be done. I think I've pretty well highlighted most things. So, so policies, basically, as I said, we need a full set. I've provided sort of the framework. I don't need to go in through them, but I would say that if you have this sort of framework and start working on each one of them, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Robert knows that better than anybody. You can beg, borrow, and steal. Just make sure that when you find and replace, that you actually find and replace the right thing, and that people actually understand the policies. And they should go to council. So as I said, there's all those sections around debt and fixed assets. For example, you don't even have a tangible capital asset policy, by the way. No one can find it. So I don't know where it is. You have your strategic asset management policy is way outdated. It needs to be redone. So tax write-offs, all of those things. And then of course around the reporting. So cash management, you need some cash handling policies, moving to one system to make sure that you've got all of your cash in one place. But you can still have decentralized cash drawers in modern ERP systems. So I'm not saying everything has to come through town hall. You just need to have the right setup. And of course, your biggest one is Bookking, and it's really outside of the system. So that needs to be updated. And then updating your cash flow forecasting. Once you've gone live with purchase orders and those kinds of things, then you can better do cash management and investments. Purchasing, very manual. It's very outdated, your processes. It's very paper driven. And like I said, the purchase orders are useless. You shouldn't even bother because they're just adding bureaucracy, not actually what it's supposed to do. And inventory. So, and then move your fixed assets. Consider a comprehensive procurement card approach as opposed to trying to, right now, even very small items are on a purchase order. Makes absolutely no sense. And finally, in terms of the customer partners, as part of the finance business plan, to develop that and a continuous improvement plan, and look at joint communications around finance. So I'm not gonna, I've gone through all of those. I'm gonna just, in terms of time, there is in the report sort of recommended timeframes for these. Obviously, these are different recommendations are going to take time. And you really, what your staff would have to do is look and create the business plan and determine when they could do that. So we have provided that in terms of timelines. I'm going to actually quickly just switch forward. So you do have those. There is, if you move towards, this is just a summary of the financial implications. If you decide to move to a new financial system, they're not cheap, I will tell you that. So they are going to cost you in the interim. Your your payback period of a financial system. So that obviously includes this. It also includes the two positions we mentioned, the purchasing officer and the analyst. Your payback is probably 5 years. Okay, so because basically it's going to take that amount of time to move all of your paper-based processes into the systems and eliminate the non-value added activities, which I've estimated is about 2 FTEs right now of time that is spent on non-value added activities. So it will take about 5 years before your investment of 300,000 would be payback. Okay. So and the budget. So on that basis, I'll just give the folks a chance to ask me some questions. So I know it's a lot, and I apologize, but it was a very important review. So I'll just stop there, and I will stop sharing.
Great. Thank you very much. And I apologize. Suddenly my whole system just shut down. It went blank. So
Oh dear.
I had to shut it off and reboot it, and we're back. So I'm not sure what happened. I hadn't touched anything. Maybe I hadn't moved fast enough on the screen. I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, I apologize for that. So thank you very much for this. I think before we take any questions, it's important to note this is the logical next step with the reorg. As you noted, when we moved to the CAO model, we knew at the time that we've known for some time that our reporting system and our budgeting system and our software, and basically the box is outdated. And so thank you. This is the logical next step. And then you look at the investment and the payback. That's always good information for council and for the community. So I know we hear that, it's paper-based for the most part, and it's tedious, lots of duplication, no communication between departments. Like those things are things that we were aware of, but it needed to be validated other than my gut feeling and Councillor Legree's gut feeling and Councillor McWhirter's gut feeling and some of the information, we were hearing from staff as they expressed their not so much frustration, but just a desire to move forward and do things differently and better. So, it's just a reassurance. This is not a crisis. We knew change was coming, and we've been waiting for it. And you're providing us with a roadmap with the last 6 or 7 slides, which are good performance and milestone indicators for us. So with that, Councillor McWhirter or Councillor Legree, do you have any questions? Councillor McWhirter, please.
So basically moving forward, first thing you got to fix is your general ledger. I'm guessing the next step would be for the committee to sit down and put some time in to go over the timeline that has been provided by the last 3 or 4 slides and see how that all fits into place going forward. Obviously, it's not going to be leaps and bounds. It's going to be a little more baby steps to get where we're going. And again, as she said, it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years to get there. But I think we should take our time and make sure we're doing it properly, so we're not having to go back and redo something or make changes partway through because we've missed a few steps or something. So this is a lot to take in. It's been very well done. Great presentation. I think we should have just had this on the agenda for the day, but it's great information. And I agree with Reeve. It's definitely been coming for a long time. Nothing has been done with that, but it's been, continue to go use the same process we've always used, and let's don't change it, don't move ahead with the times. But I think not having anything on as far as software goes is probably pretty behind the times. I think it's due to be done, but I think it would be remiss if we just jumped in the deep end. I think we'd have to move slowly and make sure we do it properly.
Thank you. Councillor Legree.
Through you, Chair, I just want to thank Ms. Brothers for putting this very well detailed report together for us. Sounds a bit like we're operating in the Stone Age, but on a good note, you know, the report identifies lots of areas for improvement and how we can streamline the process. You know, so there's a lot of takeaways. So thank you for doing this. It was very, very well. Like Councillor McWhirter said, there's a lot of information here to digest, so we'll be going over and over it. But thank you very much. I do have a question, kind of on topic, maybe a little bit off, just on reserves. And I don't know if it's an easy question to answer or not, but is there a rule of thumb of what a municipality should have the size of Renfrew with regards to reserves on hand? Or is it more depend on services and stuff like that?
Thank you, and thank you. Yeah, so through you, the chair. Actually, the most important thing for you to do right now is to get your long-term financial plan. That's going to guide your reserve decisions. So you've got your asset management plan. It's still, I don't think it, from what I read, it's not finished, really. There's still some pieces there. And of course, you've got the next iteration that's required in 2025. So the long-term financial plan really should drive that. And I guess, you know, there's not like, oh, you should have 10% on this. It's going to be based on a risk assessment as well, which of course is lacking at the moment, is around that. So, but, you know, typically you want to have about 3 years worth of coverage, if I was to say. So thinking of your own life, you know, and unfortunately most people, a lot of people today are living paycheck to paycheck, but what are you going to do when your roof falls in? It's no different that in a municipality. So you know, debt capacity is a really important thing as well. So you do have your annual repayment limit. And so the reason why that exists from a legislative perspective is that you cannot commit the town to more than 25% of your annual revenues. If you are at that, you're actually in, I think that's way too high, because you are very vulnerable to something like, you know, a climate emergency or even the pandemic. I mean, if you look at what that costs the municipalities, huge, right? So, and I know, you know, a lot of the service reviews we've done in the past, people said, oh, geez, I wish we had done some of those recommendations before the pandemic, like document management was a pretty classic case. So, you know, there's, and I guess to answer your question is you really do need to have those plans, and your strategic plan is going to be an important one. Your asset management plan, your transportation master plan, you know, any of those things that needs to come together, and then that feeds into your long-term financial plan, and that's where your reserves should be. So I noticed that Aaron had redid the reserve policy in general, but now your next step is going to be to bring those plans together and identify the reserves. And sometimes it's better to, you know, sort of amalgamate some of the reserves. Like sometimes municipalities have way too many small ones, as opposed to, especially if they're not restricted, it might be better to have a little more flexibility.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And I guess you know, in moving forward, we should thank our staff, because it sounds like, you know, when you look at the information you received, you had some very, very honest appraisals and comment. And so thank you for that. You know, thank you through the treasurer to her department and the CAO for their honesty. And then I think also across the organization, probably other departments contributed as well. But if we could just pass on that message, it's a very critical time for us. And that honesty and forthrightness is what we need as, you know, as we conduct these reviews. Okay, and so with that, seeing no further, and I'm sorry, John, did you, we've kind of ignored you. Did you have anything you wanted to add? My apologies.
No, at this point in time, I think Tammy did a great job. And the only comment I would make to support Tammy's comment is the fact that you are doing a strategic plan. That should, this particular report and the other reports that are coming forward should help inform that strategic plan, because I think they're going to underpin that strategic plan as you go forward.
Yeah, and I think to the CAO, and he's probably aware that I'll certainly be taking these slides and some of the other slides that we're getting and adding them as part of his performance appraisal goals, which will then, and I hate to use the word trickle down, but will trickle down through to the treasurer and to all the other directors. So, and I think John, and Tammy, can you, if that's the wrong approach or we need a different approach, please correct me. But I think that, that's probably an approach that we should consider and follow.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just to note that the draft strategies that are with council in a survey form do speak about technology, do speak about long-range financial plan, do speak a customer service strategy. All those items are already in the loop. And just to say to Councillor McWhirter's point, what we'll do is we'll bring this forward to council for adoption as a guiding document, and staff will then kind of work plan it and then build this into future budgets and future work plans, to the chair's point about not just mine, but the departments to implement the strat plan and all these policies. But all these reviews and all these master plans are pretty critical in setting the stage for 20 years. And I just want to thank staff because they've been doing great work with very limiting factors and get the day-to-day done quietly and don't really raise a lot of concerns and just get that done and roll with the punches with all the changes and other things we're trying to get them done. So the whole purpose of this is to inform council so that we support the staff and the good work they do, and we continuously modernize the operations. But they're doing great work, and hopefully we can provide them the resources they need to kind of go to the next level and maximize their time, their skills, their ability, their training, because if we can speed up a lot of those processes, we're going to get better value out of them, and they're not going to be having to do manual processes because they are extremely talented. So I just want to thank the staff team for the work they do.
Thank you.
I think we just lost review Mo. So we're back.
Yeah, you're back. It was just
No, I thought.
Yeah, it was slow. Yeah. It was slow, but I think you're okay now. Your connection's better.
Okay, thank you. And I was just asking if the treasurer wanted to offer a comment, because I know she loves speaking publicly. So,
of course. So I'd like to thank Tammy for preparing this review. I know it wasn't easy with trying to obtain the information, but you've worked through it, and it was a great presentation. Hopefully, if we can move forward and get the staff in place to support myself and the remaining staff in the finance department, we can implement your recommendations.
great.
Excellent. Yeah, and please do pass on our thanks to the staff. They are very busy, and they still did process mapping, as painful as it was for them. So we will be sending you out the process maps and that kind of stuff as well, Aaron, just directly to you and your team. So
thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. So to the CEO, I don't see a motion in my package, so we're not at this point making a motion to pass it to the council, or should I make one up?
I think what we'll do is we'll just do a separate report with both reviews and with a recommendation to adopt them as guiding documents with direction to staff to bring forward work plans on implementation. So we'll do that at the next regular council meeting. The presentations are just for info. We'll bring that back directly to council on Tuesday. Councillor McWhirter, you might be the acting chair.
Oh,
I think we're going to move to D.1.
Okay, so
thank you very much. We'll leave. Okay, bye-bye now. Thanks for listening.
So we'll go to D1. So actually we'll turn this over to the CEO. This is to do with the Motion for the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee recommended Renfrew Town Council approve the revived terms of reference for standing committee. CEO Tremblay, do you wish to speak to that, or?
If you can get a mover, and I think you only have one option, and then Carolyn will lead the charge on this one.
Okay, so we need a mover. That would be Jason, I guess.
That's me, yeah.
Okay. So we'll
And-
turn it over to.
Perfect. So I will, I'll keep this pretty short. But basically, the creation of standing committees in general were established under the procedural bylaw. That are meant to address ongoing kind of matters within their scope and responsibility, and are to act kind of advise and recommend and provide recommendation to council for consideration. So back in November 2022, Renfrew Town Council adopted bylaw 99-2022, which established the governance and the terms of reference for the town's 4 standing committees. Further amendments were done in April 2023. So recently there's been some changes to the town's organization structure, which has prompted kind of a restructuring of the standing committees to align with those revised roles and responsibilities for each of the departments. With the changes, a total of 5 standing committees and 1 advisory committee has been established. The committees are as follows: Development, Engineering and Environment Committee, Corporate Finance and HR Committee, Facilities, Maintenance and Operations Committee, Fire, Emergency and Protective Services Committee, Community Services and Economic Development Committee, and then lastly, the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Terms of reference for each of these committees have all been attached as Appendix A. I won't go through all of them. However, anybody has any questions, we can talk about it afterwards. They are attached in the agenda, and it breaks down what each of the roles and responsibilities are with each of those committees and kind of the areas that they'd be established. It should be noted, though, that the task force and working groups that were previously established with the last bylaw have all been kind of re-identified into the related standing committees, and that the Economic Development Advisory Committee itself has been established to engage key stakeholders and promote economic development within the community. And then lastly, the proposed schedule for each of the committees has been attached as Appendix B. This identifies both the timing of each of the committees as well as kind of council appointments. So quickly, we're looking at potentially the first week at 10 a.m., the Development, Engineering and Environment Committee. At 2 p.m., the Corporate Finance and HR Committee. On the second week would be the Economic Development Advisory Committee at 10 a.m. And then at 2 would be Facilities, Maintenance and Operations Committee. And then on the third week, we'd have Fire, Emergency and Protective Services at 10, and then Community Services and Economic Development at 2 p.m. And unless anybody has any other questions, that's kind of it.
I'm good, Jay. So good.
Okay,
So
so
do we need to vote on this?
have a vote, yeah, and then
So we can just
all in favor.
all in favor? Only 2 of us left. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So we'll move on to D2.
And Acting Chair McWhirter, the Reeves back.
Oh, perfect.
And I'm really sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. It's not a battery issue. So I went down and rebooted my router and plugged everything back in again. So I'm not sure what's going on today. Push comes to shove, I'll run it off my phone, off my hotspot. If that has to happen, but I'm really confused, and I apologize for that. So thank you very much.
The Acting Chair did a great job, so got us through to the next item.
Good. Well, keep him on deck. It may happen again.
Out of practice.
Yeah. So I think with that, we'll move to item D1 as the budget direction report, if you don't mind. And where did that go? There we go. And so if we could have, and again, it's just opening. Yes.
Mover.
Councilor Porter, a mover, please.
Can you read the motion, please?
Okay. The motion is the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee recommend that Renfrew Town Council One, direct the treasurer to prepare the 2024 operating and capital budgets, which will maintain the current levels of service within the increases noted in the report. And two, approve the 2024 budget schedule as outlined. So we have a mover, and if we could have the report, please, from the treasurer.
Thank you, Chair. And before I start with my report, I'd also like to thank my staff, Mitchell and Jen, for their assistance with providing information for the preparation of this report. I'll try and narrow some of this stuff down. I know it is a fairly lengthy report, and I know you guys have been sitting for 2 hours, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet. You all know how much I love to talk in front of the camera. So as you're aware, the preparation of the municipal budget is done by compiling information from each department within the town's organization and is used to provide the outline of services and projects that will be accomplished in the forthcoming year. So the budget represents the net costs for municipal services after removing non-property tax related revenues and results in the municipal tax levy. The municipal tax levy is applied across the assessment base to determine the tax rate, and then this tax rate is applied against the property's assessed value to determine the property tax bill for each property. It is important to note that MPAC hasn't updated the property assessment values from 2016. So for the upcoming 2024 property tax year, they will continue to be based on the January 2016 current values. What that means is that a resident's property assessment remains the same as it was for the 2023 tax year, unless there were any changes to a property, such as an addition, renovation, or new construction, or change to the property's classification. So historically, the town of Renfrew started the budget deliberations within the current budget year. And as part of the 2023 budget, it was directed by the CAO that the 2024 budget be prepared earlier and recommended to council during the fourth quarter of 2023. A schedule is provided below that tables the budget on December 19th, 2023, and ensures its adoption by February 2024. Just to note that the 2023 taxation levy was $10,063,121. Therefore, a 1% tax levy increase in 2024 equates to $100,631.21. So staff have identified some of the current budget pressures that we will be considering when preparing the 2024 budget. They're listed below as follows in your report. So the consumer price index is an indicator of changes in consumer prices experienced by Canadians, which has come from the Stats Canada website. At its most recent meeting with the county for the Renfrew County Clerks and Treasurers Finance Subcommittee meeting, it was noted that the current inflation for June to June Ontario all items CPI equates to 2.46%. And looking back at my budget report from 2023, it was noted that the CPI rose 6.8% on an average basis in 2022. Interest rates, they rose again in September of 2023 by 0.25% to 7.20%. So that will affect us when we are doing our long-term borrowing for Mattaway. The funding and revenue sources, I'm not going to go through and explain each one, but OSIF, which is used to fund our capital projects. The 2023 grant allocation was 1.2 million, and in 2022 is 1.5. Typically, the town receives notice of its annual allocation in December, so we'll wait on that for when we're preparing the budget. The OMPF funding is used to fund operations. In 2023, our grant allocation was 2.46 million, and in 2022, it was 2.4 million. The Canada Community Building Fund, which is formerly known as the Federal Gas Tax Fund, is a permanent source of funding that flows from the Government of Canada, as Revimo spoke to us about at last council meeting. This is used to fund capital. So in 2023, the allocation was 272,000. In 2022, it was 260,000. We receive notice of what our annual allocation is in December as well. A review of the fees and charges occurred in 2023 to ensure that the town of Renfrew fees were comparative to other municipalities. This will be reviewed again and updated on an annual basis. There's also been work done towards the renewal of existing leases at the Renfrew Industrial Commission Center to ensure that they are current market value. And furthermore, creation of new leases for Mattaway along with Town Hall will increase our revenues for 2024. So we have some operating costs with newly renovated spaces, Mattaway Activity Center, with the addition of the second ice pad, several rental rooms and lease spaces for tenants. The town budget's going to have to include the increased utility and staffing costs associated with this newly renovated building. In turn, as noted above, we are looking at our lease revenues and that will help offset some of those costs. The town hall building, as you know, the business hive health unit tenant space will be approached in a similar manner as Mattaway. They're going to be increased utility costs as the town hall activities increase within the newly renovated spaces. However, we will also have the new revenues being generated to offset those costs. So operating expense analysis. So just looking at our operating expenses and kind of basing what's going to be increasing in the upcoming year. I had spoke with our insurance broker and he advised that we are looking at possibly a 15% increase in 2024. IT and hardware services. I spoke with our IT provider, took inventory of our laptops and computers to see what devices are due for replacements and upgrades. It's proposed that we add in additional time for service requests. So that'll have to be added into the budget as well. There was a new cell phone policy that was implemented, which will require certain staff to have phones. Staff are currently reviewing cell phone plans for the best possible deal for our corporation. The fuel and utility costs seem to have stabilized for the most part, therefore should not forecast a significant increase in 2024. I know last year we did forecast an increase as fuel seemed to be rising. Our OPP annual billing costs in 2024, our costs are going to be 1.8 million, which is a reduction from 2023, which again was at 1.8 million, but we do note a savings of $2,151. Ontario Clean Water Agency, as you know, we are entering into negotiations with them. So upon initial discussions with Aqua, it was determined by the treasurer that there could be potential savings of approximately $150,000, which can be allocated to a reserve for future capital usage. Our debenture repayment costs, the town currently pays $1,340,411 in debenture repayments annually. With the upcoming completion of our major capital works such as Mattaway, Argyle, Lochiel, we will have to look at accommodating the debt repayment costs. Currently, the Infrastructure Ontario rates as of October 16th were 5.18%. The estimated annual debenture repayment for Mattaway is approximately $792,000 with a repayment term of 30 years. This will be discussed and reviewed with council during budget deliberations. I'm just trying to give you a fair estimate as to what you're looking at for what's to come. Staffing. So a review, as you know, was completed by Tammy, which has resulted in organizational structure changes, which will cause an impact on staffing and payroll costs. Per our QP agreement, annual increase of 2% for 2024, and noting that our agreements are up at the end of 2024, so will need to be reviewed. With the QP agreement increase of 2%, it will allot for a non-union increase of 2% as well. Seeing there was no increase in 2023, however, there were other items that were received for the non-union staff. New benefit plans implemented in 2024 by SSQ Benefa, which will result in a savings of approximately $50,000. On a review of our 2024 capital budgets. The capital budget forecast is a summary of projects that are required to be completed. Just looking at our reserves, just to give you an estimate of where we're at with the balances. Currently, the unaudited 2022 year-end balances of the town reserves are 14 million. And upon passing of the 2023 capital budget, it was estimated the town would utilize approximately $7.8 million in reserves and allocate 3.1 back into reserves, leaving an estimated balance of $9.9 million for 2024 capital budgets. During the year, there were a few projects that did require additional financing. Updated figures are in this this little schedule below to show you where there were some increases, and then leaving the balance of the reserves at 9.5 million, as I noted. So the financial implications, council will advise what their targeted increase is. We estimated a 3% levy increase to start. Capital contribution to reserves increase was 10% in 2023. The estimated increase for 2024 is approximately 12% in order to include debt repayment for upcoming debentures. Our water, wastewater increases are based on the study provided by Watson and Associates, which typically equates to a 2.5% overall increase to the water and wastewater bill. Payroll budget, at first glance, we've prepared the 2024 draft payroll budget, which shows an approximate increase of 9.2%. And then listed below is our schedule of events for the budget passing. So on October 19th, today is my report asking our advising committee of our pressures and where we're at. And then on December 19th at the special council meeting, we'll table the draft budget, and so on from there. We'll take it to the standing committees for their review as well. And then it'll come back to council for their final approval. Any questions? I would be happy to answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And this is, for those that are watching, this is a pretty common practice for council, usually through a finance committee across the sector, to offer targets. And some direction. You can't send staff out into the world with, oh, we weren't given any boundaries, and so we just put a budget together. It's not fair to them, and it's not proper management. So very quickly, the 2022 year end and then 2023 year end, if we end up with a surplus, a couple questions around surplus. So in general, the surplus, a true surplus, and I'll define what I mean by that, we would likely roll that into unallocated reserves. It would be is our common practice. So when I say true surplus, that means the surplus isn't generated by unfinished projects. So unfinished projects or projects that are in transition to being completed, those monies are moved forward into a specific reserve, holding them for that project to be completed. Or should the project be pulled off the list, then those monies go back into the appropriate reserves. Is that a fair analysis of it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So whatever the true surplus is, it'll go into unallocated at some point. And do we have any sense of the timeline on those, like the 2022 and then subsequently 2023, recognizing our staff changes and COVID and changes with our auditor, slow and their shop have slowed things down.
Mm-hmm. So our hope is to have it to the auditor. My hope is to have it to the auditor within the next week or so, and then it'll be a matter of them auditing our work and then preparing the statements. So it's as long as they can turn it around fairly quickly, we should have it hopefully by mid-November. But
so in theory, it'd be safe to suggest our December meeting, we should have that information.
I would like to hope.
Okay. No, I understand the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those were my questions just in general. And if I might, Councillor Legree or Councillor McWhorter, any questions on the report and the recommendations?
No questions, Chair, for me.
Okay, pardon me? Nothing for you? Okay. And then Councillor McWhorter, you muted yourself, sir.
Sorry, I was coughing. That's why I muted. So what we're sending the finance department out to sort of as a gray area shoot for this mark is 3%. Is that what I read here?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay, so you got to start somewhere. So
yes.
then this will go to council, and then from there it'll go to committees, and which point we can yay or nay or whatever and go from there. So just so people, whoever the 4 people who are watching, don't panic. It's just a starting point, as Reeve Emo has said, and we have to have something in order to move forward. So
Mhm.
good job, by the way, finance. I know you've been really busy between the report we just did and this. You really have been busy. So, good job.
Thank you.
yes, thank you. Yes, and I should note, I don't think we really recognize the complexity of and the just how large an operation the town of Renfrew is. But when you take a look at page 2, where it says our total budget was $79 million, and I know that includes a capital budget of 49 million and wastewater and water, but it's a pretty we're a pretty significant employer, and we're a pretty significant generator of economic activity within the town and within the region. And when you couple that with the report we had last month on our purchases, how much money we're able to keep in the community. So this is really nice to see. I really like the including these kinds of numbers. So it reminds us and reminds the public now and in 10 years when there's questions about how much is being generated and put into the community. So thank you for that. Councilor McWhorter again.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I'm just kind of looking at things here. The 3%, if that's the target, sort of tentatively, is that taking into effect Mattaway? Because I don't think we're going to know till probably next year, hopefully early next year, where we come in at with that. And also, my second question was a 15% increase in insurance. I see is rather high. I'm just wondering if what their excuse was for 15% increase. I mean, even in today's world, that's quite a jump.
Through you, Chair. So truth be told, our insurance actually has been increasing anywhere from 10 to 14% through the past years. I know the CAO has advised that we probably should put out an RFP, but I do know that it seems to be that way across the board. After speaking with other municipalities as well, they all seem to be facing the same sort of increases, but it definitely doesn't hurt to do the RFP for the insurance to see what else is out there. I'm sorry, and I forget what your previous question to that was.
The 3% is Mattaway in consideration of that, or is that something we're going to get?
I will have to look at that because our debt repayment limit, but I do know part of the payment was incorporated into our budget, and we will have to look at that as well as the other capital projects that we are looking at debenturing, like the Argyle Lockheed. So that won't be included in the 2024 budget, but will be in the next year's budget as well.
And just to add, Kelly and Randy, and then now Janet are working on revenue projections and staffing projections and expense projections. So we're hopefully going to have a really great guess on what that looks like in terms of conservative on revenue, and very kind of hopefully very clear on expenses. So you have a good sense of how the facility will operate and its costs and potential revenues. And they've done some preliminary work, and Aaron and I have looked at some of it, but as part of the process, we'll get that. So you'll get the debt part and the financing piece that Aaron just referenced, but you'll also get the operational side. And then trying to make sure the place is filled and we're getting as much revenue as we can. And that also the staffing is right, so we don't open and then fail in terms of being able to operate the facility properly. So kudos to the staff, the operational staff who are doing some of that work now, so that Aaron can review it, and then I can also have a second look at it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. And to add, when the public takes a look and they and members of council too, and they see and staff when they see that, you know, we're posting new jobs and how's this going to impact. So as council committee will remember, we've been moving, you know, with the advice of staff, we've been moving job descriptions and people around within the existing funding envelope for the most part with those hires. They've been covered off because they've been budgeted in the past. And as people have left, we've changed the job descriptions to meet our evolving needs, but we've been able to maintain that funding envelope with those hires. So the hires aren't likely, you know, all things being equal, aren't likely to generate an additional drain on that, you know, for the sake of argument, that 3%, recommendation. So seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None. It's carried. Thank you. And with that, we'll move to D 3.1, and I believe Ms. Charbonneau is leading us on that one.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is essentially just to tie up the loose ends for the administrative loop regarding the naming rights at Mattaway. In April, Council directed staff to bring forward the necessary agreements that you will see attached in this report for sponsorship and naming rights at Mattaway. And additionally, staff at that April 25th meeting directed staff to issue expression of interest for the remaining spaces at the activity center. So attached to the report, you will see the agreements as I previously stated. They are for a total of 10 years. However, there is an option stated in the agreements to negotiate at the 5-year mark. And there's a table attached on the report to represent all of the confirmed naming rights. Each of the party does have the draft agreements in their possession, and it should be noted that Ontario Power Generation, OPG, they're currently having their document reviewed by their legal team. However, they are a confirmed party at this point in time still. And aside from this and getting council's confirmation on entering into the naming agreements at the next council meeting, staff will also then move forward in publishing the further expression of interest for the remaining spaces. And it should be noted that there's an anticipated an additional $11,500 of revenue yet to gain from those agreements if they're filled in totality. So we hope to get those out in the next few weeks and out to the public to solidify the empty spaces we still have left. And again, the proceeds, as you'll see in the table from the confirmed naming rights, equal approximately $40,250 in annual revenue for the space. So we're looking forward to filling the remaining spaces and having council's approval to enter into the agreements with our parties that we've worked pretty hard with to get everything right. And then it's just proceeding and getting signage up and the space branded. And I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any from the committee.
So my apologies to committee. I didn't introduce the motion that Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee recommend Renfrew Town Council approve entering into agreements with the confirmed naming rights / sponsorship partners. And can I have a mover, please? Councillor LaGree. And so with that, we'll go ahead with questions. Again, I apologize, my system went down. The little green box didn't come back up and I didn't think to check it. So I think I'm organized for the remaining 10 minutes of the meeting. So with that, Councillor McWhirter. And then Councillor LaGree.
Through you, Chair. So if I understand it, I did read a couple there, one particular one that I might be involved with, but since you're asking for money, it's not a pecuniary interest. It says 5 years and then renegotiate for another 5 years, or are they actually 10 years contracts? Because originally they were to be 10-year contracts.
Ms. Charbonneau.
I think she's looking at me.
I'm looking at CAO Tremblay simply because I've hopped in to this pretty much at the finish line.
Oh.
So he has further context into the structuring of the agreements.
Yeah. So 10 years is a long time. So what we've structured is an ability for both parties to relook at it after 5. We do know, and kudos to Sun Life who have prepaid. So if an organization wants to prepay for the full 10 years, then we'll lock in the price. Should they choose not to and pay on an annual basis, it would provide them and us an opportunity to either look at it or make changes after 5. But given the volume of traffic we will have in this facility and the importance of those rights, we felt that a look at halfway through would be appropriate. But if any of the proponents want to pay in advance for the full 10 years, then we would make a note on file and make sure that that was good. But we thought it was good business practice to allow an opportunity to potentially renegotiate at the 5-year mark, but it would really come down to the council of the day on whether they wanted to stick with the levels or change it. But again, we want to be good partners and want to do that. And if anybody wants to prepay, I know some have and some are expected to, then that would lock them in for the full 10 years. But if they're moved out of town or encountering financial difficulty or anything of that nature, it just provides a future council to be able to look at it in 5 years' time.
Okay, yep, that's great. I do know the Recreation Fundraising Committee originally was asked to about paying. It was, I think the vote was that we would pay up front for the 10 years, but again, it's been a while since we've had a executive meeting at that level. So I think I'll have to talk to perhaps our banker and get back on that then, if that's okay with you, CEO Tremblay.
Certainly, and if the preference is to pay in advance for the full 10 years, then that's great. At the 5-year mark, we don't have to worry about the Rec Fundraising Committee and the good work they do to help fund things within our recreation centers. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Legree, please.
Through you, Chair. I'm not sure which one you want to take this, but I'm just curious. I think Mrs. Charbonneau said that there's a couple of spaces still, we're still looking for naming rights on. Can you just maybe explain what they are and how many there is, please?
I know that there are a number of dressing rooms available. Off the top of my head, I actually can't. Oh, actually, hold on. I'm sifting through my notes here, but I can't name them all off the top of my head, but I know all the dressing rooms are available and they will all be listed comprehensively in the expressions of interest that we anticipate going out within the next couple of weeks.
And just add to that, and one multi-purpose room.
Oh, yes, correct.
Perfect. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Great, thank you. And seeing no more questions, and I don't see anybody else wanting to offer comment, I'll call for all those in favor. Opposed? None. It's carried. Thank you very much, committee. And we'll move to item number D 3.2. And with that, we will ask for that the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee recommend Renfrew Town Council approve the license agreement for the use of the shared office space in the Ottawa Valley Business Hub in Renfrew with Enterprise Renfrew County. So if I could have a mover, please. Councillor McWhirter. And with that, we'll ask for the report from Ms. Charbonneau again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To summarize this, we talked a lot about the Business Hive. It's located in the old OPP space in Town Hall. The renovations have been completed. Currently, the finance team is doing operations there for business continuity while the rest of Town Hall is renovated. However, upon its opening with all of the partners, it's going to be a great regional economic development hub along with all community services that we offer to business owners and the public to access. So in our continued negotiations and talk with our collaborative partners, the Renfrew County, who is a very important strategic partner, has come up, and through them, their ERC, which is also referred to as the Enterprise Renfrew County, they offer a lot of wonderful business services for entrepreneurs, training courses, and their plethora of resources for startups and current businesses. So again, they would be a natural partner to have do some office sharing space and some collaborative co-working in our Business Hive. So that being said, again, this is just part of our administrative loop, and through conversations with staff at the County of Renfrew, we've entered into some conversations to have them join us in our co-working space. The agreement has been attached to the report for review. It's very similar to the rest of the other partners in the Hive. And if you'll remember, the other partners in the Business Hive are currently the Renfrew Area Chamber of Commerce, Community Futures and Development Corporation, the Renfrew County chapter, as well as the BIA, the Renfrew BIA, and economic development staff for the town will be housed within the Business Hive for that collaborative business hub. And through our conversations with Renfrew County, again, the agreement reflects all of the terms of the co-working space. And as you may recall, each year we as a town do an annual payment to the Enterprise Renfrew County of $1,000. So part of this co-working agreement would be, to offset that payment. And instead of paying them $1,000, we'd pay them $501 on an annual basis and have them join us in the hub. So that would be the financial impact. And then to note, the other Business Hive partners each month will generate $1,000 in revenue. And then one last note about the Business Hive, just so everyone remembers it, it's going to be a great working space, but we'll also have desk hoteling or hot desking for other entrepreneurs or other collaborative partners that wish to rent some space from us. And then we'll also be offering to the public and entrepreneurs and businesses some really great business spaces within our other amenities in the town for private office working spaces, boardrooms, meetings, so on and so forth. So that's all going to be rolling out with the Hive. But again, this is to enter into an agreement or have the approval to enter into the agreement with the ERC to have them join us officially. And I answer any questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. Any questions from anyone, members of council or member of committee? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None. It's carried. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next item, which is the D3.3.3, the commemorative naming request update for Mac Wilson. And I will ask Ms. Charbonneau again, please, in a minute, that the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee recommend that Renfrew Town Council approve the commemorative naming request for the subject parkland on Eagle Avenue, roll number 47 48 000 020 18 765 0000 to be named Mac Wilson Park. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor McWhorter. With that, Ms. Charbonneau, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep this brief. We in June, we had come effective a commemorative naming policy, which is a great policy to move through a process of due diligence and research and public notice to commemoratively name various aspects of town property. So subsequent to our policy being approved by council in June, we received a letter from the family of Mac Wilson to have the park in Hunter Gate, the Hunter Gate subdivision, named Mac Wilson Memorial Park. Again, at the time, the clerk reviewed the criteria within the policy. Everything fit. So part of that criteria was bringing a public notice about the intended or potential naming of the park. And that was on the town website and also in the paper, which was the Eganville Leader. Those notices are attached to this report along with the letter that is required as per the policy. So at the time of the report writing and up to today, prior to committee meeting, there has been no public commentary received. So what I'm doing today is tying the administrative loop on the policy. Everything fits. I have confirmed with the family that is requesting the commemorative naming that they do wish to have the park named Mac Wilson Memorial Park. And that's for committee's endorsement. And on a side note, for the park and for the branding and for the signage that is on the town, and we are awaiting our new branding to be official. And what we will do is plan for 2024 to roll out the park signage, whatever that looks like. We're hoping it's going to be consistent throughout the town. And the family has agreed that they're happy to wait and have a memorial or a naming service in the spring of 2024 when weather and conditions permit for signage to be installed in the ground. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none, you've heard the motion, you've heard the report, and any discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? None. It's carried. Thank you. That's what happens when you have a little routine going. So with that, we'll move to F, which is committee minutes. And I don't see a motion. Do we accept these to my recollection? Clerk or treasurer, please. Or sorry.
My apologies.
Yes, clerk.
My apologies. Yes, there is a motion. It's just hiding. 1 second.
So if you could go ahead and read it, because
Yeah, of course. That the Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee confirmed the minutes of the committee meeting 7-2023 dated September 19th, 2023.
okay. Thank you. And if I could have a mover, Councillor Legree, and then CL Tremblay, were you trying to say something, or was that? No, okay. Not sure what that was. All right. Any comments or discussions? All right, with that, all those in favor? Opposed? None. It's carried. Thank you very much. And the upcoming minutes, you saw from the schedule, so I haven't transferred that to an actual date yet, but we are the first Tuesday on every month at 2 o'clock for this committee, I believe. And so with that, I don't need a motion to adjourn. I'd like to thank staff for the information day. Lots of information, good information. And again, you know, the contribution you made to the both studies, the one we heard today, the one we're going to hear later on this afternoon, and I think there's a couple other ones coming. And so thank you for that. And again, to committee, thank you very much for reading your package and sitting patiently through 3.5 hours. A lot of information, but we knew change was coming and it was necessary, and it takes time to do that correctly, as you've all noted. So we'll adjourn.